The 2022 NCAA Tournament ends with the Kansas Jayhawks cutting down the nets after a 72-69 victory over the North Carolina Tar Heels in the national championship game. And what a national championship game that it was. However, in the final minute, kind of some controversy, some kind of harsh reactions in the final minute, which I'll get to that in just a little bit. But this game started off nearly, if not exactly, the same way that Kansas and Villanova started their game in the Final Four on Saturday, where Kansas got off to a hot start. It began with Abachi knocking down a three-pointer. Kansas started off the game up 7-0, and then North Carolina, they clawed their way back into the game. As your objective when you're an underdog like North Carolina, first of all, North Carolina has not played like an 8 seed at all in weeks, maybe even months. So the seeding was definitely flawed, I think, more than ever in this tournament. As North Carolina, they played like, at the very worst, a 3 seed in this tournament. But they stayed in the game start to finish, as I said that they were going to. And then once the second half came along, the further on the game went, the better Kansas was going to be. But North Carolina, they went on a run. I believe it was a 16-1 run. And North Carolina, they were up by as many as 16 points in this game. And they had a 15-point lead at the half. But Kansas, they found a way to come back in the second half. It started off with a vicious dunk by David McCormick. And then Colin Brown, he knocked down a couple layups to get Kansas back into it. And an unsuspecting hero for Kansas emerged in this second half, and that was Remy Martin, knocking down 4 3-pointers in the game and ending the game with 14 points, one of the leading scorers for Kansas tonight. But then once Kansas got back into the game, it was just a back-and-forth game throughout the end. And as far as this national championship game as a whole, I'd say that this is probably maybe second or third best championship game that I have seen. And I've been watching college basketball since, I think, maybe 2007, 2008. I'd say the only championship game that definitely beats it for sure is Villanova, North Carolina back in 2016. I think you can make an argument for 2019. And then this one, it's either second or three. It's second or third as far as best championship game of all time, in my opinion. But I want to get into the last minute of this game, because Armando Bacot, he ended up turning the ball over, but it had a lot to do with what I believe the floor, as there is a tweet that clearly shows that the wood floor buckles beneath his foot and that it wasn't properly in place. And then later we find out on the very last play of the game, Manick also tripped on that exact same spot of the floor on that last play of the game, which really messed up the flow of that final play design by North Carolina, which ended up causing Caleb Love to fire up a desperate 3-point shot. And it wasn't that good of a look, to be honest, as it was an air ball. But before that, just awful execution on that final stretch before that last play was taking place. There was 3 opportunities to get the game tying 3-pointer. And the first one, a very terrible shot to take. Second one, another terrible shot to take. The third one, a turnover. But then North Carolina gets lucky that they get one last chance to tie this game up. And as I mentioned a moment ago, this is where Brady Manick, He tripped on that exact same spot where Baycott did just moments before. And it messed up the play design. So did North Carolina get cheated on that moment? You could say so, but at the same time, North Carolina, they had a lead by as many as 16 points. And with Kansas coming back and winning the game, that is the largest comeback in championship game history. But I will indeed post a link to the tweet where Baycott, where you can clearly see that the wood buckles beneath his foot. And I have no idea why the NCAA continues to have tournament games, Final Four games. Why do they continue to have them in football fields? Because that's just what happens when you put a basketball court beneath a football field. They need to start making the Final Four in regular basketball arenas. They should just look at the city that is planning to host the Final Four that year and then play on the NBA court of that city, because pretty much the majority of teams that, the majority of cities that host the Final Four, they have an NBA team. Like, for example, this season, they could have hosted the Final Four in the Pelicans arena. Then I believe last year it was in Indianapolis, and they should have hosted the final. Well, Indianapolis was completely fine because it was all in the same city and they were all on basketball courts anyway. So that was fine. But the one before that, I can't remember where it was in 2019. My memory's a little off, but they need to consider just having the Final Four in regular basketball arenas. But you got to give it up for both teams, because Kansas, despite being down by 15 at the half, they did not let the game get away from them. It looked like North Carolina was going to run away with the game. But Kansas, they came back in the second half. They closed in the gap quickly. And then they never looked back. Then they stayed in it and ultimately held on to win. North Carolina, it was impressive just that they got to this point in the season. An 8 seed, I believe that is tied for the lowest seed to ever make the championship game. But as far as next season goes, North Carolina, I think they're going to be a contender next season. They'll probably be one of the favorites. I know that Brady Manick is going to be gone. Baycott, there's a chance that he's going to come back, but he might declare for the NBA draft. Love should be back, I think. For the Jayhawks, well, lately there's been a tradition that the defending champion gets knocked out in the second round of next year's tournament. So we'll see if the Jayhawks can break that curse or if they're going to fall victim to that curse. So that is all I have. And as a rating for the entire tournament, I'd say it's pretty disappointing compared to other tournaments that we've had. We had 0 buzzer beaters this entire tournament. I don't know if that's ever happened before. At least it hasn't happened since I started watching college basketball. I'd give the tournament about maybe 7.5. I feel like this tournament could have been a bit better. We did see a Cinderella story in St. Peter's make the Elite Eight. Coach K's last dance ended the Final Four like it was meant to be. Unfortunately, he didn't get to cut down the nets. But it felt great to see that the venues, they were packed once again for this tournament, as last year was the CVID 19 tournament where the seating was very limited. So it was great to see 100% capacity at this tournament again. And overall, this was a nice college basketball season. But the tournament, I feel like, could have been a little bit better. Could have really been nice if we had some buzzer beaters. But the first day of the tournament was awesome. 3 overtime games. St. Peter's upsets Kentucky. But as far as the top 5 games in this NCAA tournament, I feel like North Carolina is involved in at least 3 of them, maybe even 4 of them. But that's all I have.